Chapter 3. Just about the time Asakawa was settling into bed at the Oshima Hot Springs Hotel, Ryuji was dozing at his desk in his apartment. His lips rested on a half-written essay, his spittle smudging the dark blue ink. He was so tired that his hand still clutched his beloved Mont Blanc fountain pen. He hadn't switched over to a word processor yet. Suddenly, his shoulders jerked and his face contorted unnaturally. Ryuji leapt up. His back went ramrod straight, and his eyes opened far wider than they usually did when he woke up. His eyes were normally slightly slanted, and when they were wide open like this, he looked different, somehow cuter than usual. His eyes were bloodshot. He'd been dreaming. Ryuji, normally not afraid of anything, was shaking through and through. He couldn't remember the dream. But the tautness of his body and his trembling bore witness to the terror of the dream. He couldn't breathe. He looked at the clock. 9:40. He couldn't immediately figure out the significance of the time. The lights were on, the overhead fluorescent bulb and the desk lamp in front of him, and there was plenty of light, but things still felt too dark. He felt an instinctual fear of the dark. His dream had been ruled by a darkness like no other. Ryuji swiveled in his chair and looked at the video deck. The fateful tape was still in it. For some reason, he couldn't look away again. He kept staring at it. His breathing became rough. Misgiving showed on his face. Images raced through his mind, leaving no room for logical thought. Shit, you've come. He placed both hands on the edge of the desk and tried to figure out what was behind him. His apartment was in a quiet place, just off of Main Street, and all sorts of indistinct sounds came in from the street. Occasionally, the revving of an engine or the squeal of tires would stand out, but other than that, the sounds from outside were just a dull, solid mass stretching out behind him to the left and right. Pricking up his ears, he could figure out what was making some of the noises. Among them were the voices of insects. The mixed-up herd of sounds now started to float and flutter like a ghost. Reality seemed to recede. That was Ryuji's impression. And as reality receded, it left an empty space around him, in which some sort of spirit matter hovered. The chilly night air and the moisture clinging to his skin turned into shadows and closed in on him. The beating of his heart grew faster, outstripping the ticking of the clock. The signs were pressing down on his chest. Ryuji looked again at the clock. 9:44. Every time he looked, he gulped. A week ago, when I watched that video at Asakawa's, what time was that? He said his brat always goes to sleep at around 9. Assuming we hit play after that, we would have finished at. He couldn't figure out exactly when they'd finished watching the video, but he could tell that the time was fast approaching. He was well aware that these indications that were now closing in on him were no counterfeit. This was different from when one's imagination magnified one's fears. This was no imaginary pregnancy. It was definitely coming steadily closer. What he didn't know was, why is it only coming for me? Why is it coming for me when it didn't come for Asakawa? It's not fair. His mind overflowed with confusion. What the hell's going on? Didn't we figure out the charm? So why? 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 His chest was beating in alarm. It felt like something had reached inside his breast and was squeezing his heart. Pain shot through his spine. He felt a cool touch on his neck and, startled, He tried to get up from his chair, but instead he was overcome by severe pain in his waist and back. He collapsed on the floor. Think. What should you do now? Somehow, his remaining consciousness managed to give orders to his body. Stand. Stand and think. Ryuji crawled over the floor mats to the video deck. He pushed eject and took out the tape. Why am I doing this? There was nothing else he could do but take a good long look at this tape that was behind everything. He looked at it back and front, and then went to put it back in the video deck, but stopped. There was a title written on the label on the spine of the tape. Asakawa's handwriting. Liza Minnelli, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., 1989. It must have had some music program recorded on it, before Asakawa had used it to dub that video. An electric jolt ran down his spine. A single thought swiftly took shape in his otherwise blank mind. Nonsense, he told himself, putting the thought from his mind. But when he turned the tape over, that momentary jolt changed to a certainty. Suddenly, Ryuji understood many things. The riddle of the charm, the old woman's prophecy, and another power hidden in the images on that tape. Why had those 4 kids and Villa log cabin run off without trying to carry out the charm? Why was Ryuji facing death when Asakawa's life had been spared? What had Sadako given birth to? The hint was right here, so close at hand. He hadn't realized that Sadako's power had become fused with another power. She'd wanted to have a child, but her body couldn't bear one. So she made a bargain with the devil for lots of children. What effect is this going to have? Ryuji wondered. He laughed through his pain, an ironic laugh. You've got to be kidding. I wanted to watch the end of mankind. And here I am, in the vanguard. He crawled to the telephone and started to dial Asakawa's home number, but then he remembered. He was on Oshima. Son of a bitch will sure be surprised when he hears I'm dead. The terrific pressure in his chest made his ribs creak. He dialed Mai Takano's number. Ryuji wasn't sure whether it was a fierce attachment to life or just a desire to hear her voice one last time which had given rise to this impulse to summon Mai. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. But a voice came to him. Give it up. It wouldn't be right to get her messed up in this. But on the other hand, he still had a smidgen of hope. He might still be in time. The clock on the desk caught his eye. 9:48. He put the receiver to his ear and waited for Mai to come to the phone. His head suddenly felt unbearably itchy. He put his hand to his head and scratched furiously, and felt several strands of hair come out. On the second ring, Ryuji lifted his face. There was a horizontal mirror in the chest of drawers in front of him, and he could see his face reflected in it. Forgetting that he had the phone wedged between his shoulder and his head, he brought his face in close to the mirror. The receiver fell, but he didn't care. He just stared at his face in the mirror. Somebody else was reflected there. The cheeks were yellowish, dried, and cracked, and hair was falling out in clumps to reveal brown scabs. A hallucination. It's got to be a hallucination, he told himself. Even so, he couldn't control his emotions. A woman's voice came from the receiver where it lay on the floor. Hello? Hello? Ryuji couldn't stand it. He screamed. His screams overlapped with Mai's words, and in the end he wasn't able to hear his beloved's voice. The face in the mirror was none other than his own, 100 years in the future. Even Ryuji hadn't known it would be so terrifying to meet himself transformed into someone else. Mai Takano picked up the phone on the fourth ring and said, "Hello?" The only answer was a ghastly scream. A shudder came over the line. Fear itself came through the line from Ryuji's apartment to Mai's. Surprised, Mai held the receiver away from her ear. The moans continued. The first scream had been one of shock, and the subsequent moans held incredulity. She'd received harassing phone calls several times before, but she immediately realized that this was different and brought the phone back to her ear. The voice ceased. It was followed by dead silence. 9:49 p.m. His wish to hear the voice of the woman he loved one last time had been cruelly shattered. Instead, all he'd done was drown her in his death cries. Now he breathed his last. Nothingness enveloped his consciousness. Mai's voice came again from the receiver near his hand. His legs were splayed out on the floor. His back was up against the bed. His left arm was thrown back across the mattress. His right hand was stretched out toward the receiver, which still whispered, "Hello?" And his head was bent backwards, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Just before he slipped into the void, Ryuji realized he wouldn't be saved, and he remembered to wish with all his might that he could teach that asshole Asakawa the secret of the videotape. Mai called, "Hello? Hello?" over and over again. No reply. She put the receiver back in the cradle. Those groans had sounded familiar. A premonition crept into her breast, and she picked up the receiver again to dial her esteemed professor's number. She got a busy signal. She pressed down the hook with her finger and dialed again. Still busy. And she knew that it had been Ryuji calling, and that something horrible had happened to him.